Okay, we're going to start here. Okay, everybody just come on in and grab a seat. Right now I want everybody to pull out their cell phone. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn the volume off on them or turn them off completely. We don't want to have any disruptions during the presentation. So, okay? Thank you very much. Well, on behalf of the Fustead family, Northside Elevator, and PROVIMI North America, we'd like to welcome you to and thank you for coming to our virtual tour. My name is Tim Thompson. I'm a senior dairy specialist for PROVIMI North America. I've been working in the field as tech support for 33 years, of which 22 and a half has been with PROVIMI. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to you the Fustead family and Fustead farms, Fustead Holsteins. With us today we have Brian, his wife Wendy, and Brian's mother. Darlene. And then we also have the farm's nutritionist, Dan Bender. On this video, we are going to take a little tour and insight into this very high productive, high genetic potential herd.
They're getting structured out here.
We're going to take a look at this 550 cow dairy, which is run by fourth generation Brian Fustead, his wife Wendy, and their family. The fifth generation is coming and yet to take their place in the history of this very, very excellent herd. With that said, we're going to get started here. And any questions? We're going to take any questions towards at the end of the talk. And if you got a question, raise your hand, and I'll get around with the microphone, and we'll get started.
I was 8 years old. I was driving a tractor already, but different tractors than today. But I was cutting hay already and all that. I mean, I never had any desire to do anything else.
Brian and Wendy have built a tremendous herd of cattle, and so we all wanted to do good, so we sat down beforehand and got things set up, what our plan was and where we were going, what we wanted to accomplish.
We walked through things right from the very beginning. He had a lot of points, way to do stuff and whatever, and it's been very helpful. The most prestigious bull I ever bred was Fustead Emery Blitz, and that goes back to a test daughter that we had, which was out of the Black Star.
Okay, welcome. And I'd just like to say about the first part here, about it's all in the family. I am the fourth generation. My son Tyler and my daughter Jennifer would be the fifth generations. They're both married. My daughter and son-in-law have three boys, which we are currently living together with, but my wife and I are just completing a new house. But then my son and daughter, they have 3 children also, so we have 6 grandchildren, which would be the 6th generation, all within a quarter mile. We all live that close together, and my mother's only a half mile away, and my sister's a half mile away, so we're all very close. And going back, like I said, every generation has lived together for a while, going back to my great-grandpa. And so today we're in the process of transitioning. My mother has handed most of the farm over to us now, so now we're starting to work the next generation, and my son's getting equity in some cows, getting cows and stuff, and you have to do that to keep it going. The nutrition part we're gonna pass over for right now yet. My brother-in-law will talk about that here a little later, nutrition. But our facility, it'll be 3 years here next week, October 8th of 14. We started milking in this brand new facility. And when we started planning this, my wife and I have milked 140 cows in a tie stall barn for the last 30 years. And my son wanted to farm in the worst way. I mean, he's a diehard, works long hours and everything, but he just wasn't thrilled about milking cows in a tie stall barn. So we were contemplating building this. Actually, all he really would have been satisfied was a retrofit situation where we were gonna build onto our barn and put a parlor in the old part of the barn, and that just, we run into all kinds of problems with permits and everything else. So the idea of the new facility, which you've seen on the screen, was born, and I am tickled to death that we did that. Because now we're actually set up for the future. We built a 400 stall barn with a double 12 parlor, but it's expandable to a 16. So I mean, we got room to grow, and everything is new. Conditions with the new style barn and everything for the cows, the comfort's unbelievable. I mean, when we were in our old barn, our herd average was like 24,000. And when we moved into this barn, I mean, the cow comfort, the 3 times a day, and the nutrition between those 3 things, we're over 31,000 now. And this last month, we hit 1250 of butter fat for rolling herd average. So it's just been unbelievable, the transition, and how well it's all going that way. So, want me to touch on genomics now already, or move on? Yeah, I think there's another slide for that later. Okay, that I can just. Okay, speaking of this slide, I'll just point out, because obviously my sister, my mother, and my wife were the only ones here today, because you know, a farm, there's got to be somebody there all the time. But up in the tall guy here in the corner, that's my son-in-law with his wife right alongside of him. And then Tyler is my son. He's way over on the left side, and his wife is right next to him. That's our immediate family. The rest of these are employees. The bottom row here are the guys that do the barn stuff for the most part. The guy in the middle in the back, he's our mechanic. The guy in between my son and that's Doug, who's also here. He helps out with the DHI records and does all our registry and stuff. So it's a team effort, but our group of milkers and stuff, as a family, we don't really milk it all anymore. We count on them, but we're like, between my son and I, we're our own herdsmen, and you know, do that stuff all ourselves. We don't have specific herdsmen or anything like that. We just share in responsibilities and manage things that way. And as you can see, with our 1,300 acres, we grow about 700 acres of corn, 500 to 600 acres of hay, and usually 100 acres of peas and oats. And we're gaining some ground as we go, because we're still buying our shell corn at this point, because we made this transition from 150 cows to 550 over a couple of years. So it's a little slower going, getting enough land to support all that. But so as far as our feed storage and stuff, we are currently just making all piles. And we've had great luck with that, very little spoilage. We just got done doing our corn silage last night, as a matter of fact. It took us 1 week to chop like 450 acres. We made 3 different piles. So when our haylage goes in piles, each crop goes into a different pile. I think that gives us a little more, you know, versatile than just putting it in bunkers, because we can select and feed from more than 1 pile at a time, being they're not huge. But so that's pretty much take care of that.
All of us grow, not just the owners of the farm, but me as a nutritionist and the feed mill, building that relationship and taking care of the problems. And the one thing that I always liked is the love that they have for farming, I share. and that makes it a lot easier, I think, for a relationship to build when you're working with them so closely. And so yeah, I think for what we've done in the small time that we've been together, it's been a reward for them and for myself and Northside Elevator.
I mean, the guys who deliver feed are very friendly, and talk to them, and the owner, Ted Brusewitz, I talked to him a lot of times about different feeds and booking feeds, and it's just an all-around really good relationship with our side, very good people.
Okay, I'm Dan Bender. I work for Northside Elevator, and I've worked with Brian, obviously, since he started. And Northside Elevator, we're about 45 minutes from Brian. And like Brian said, we started out when Brian was on the stanchion barn. He was feeding around 70% alfalfa haylage, always put up really good forage, and then 30% corn silage. When he built, he decided he was going to try this BMR corn silage, which he did try the first year. Didn't have a full amount of that to feed for the year, but just wanted to give it a try. And so we tried that. It worked out well in his herd, and now we actually are, and I think it was a little over 400 acres of BMR corn silage got done as of last night. So we feed about 60% corn silage now, which is the BMR, and then we feed 40% of first, second, third, and sometimes fourth crop alfalfa. And then the heifers get the peas and oats that he was talking about with a little bit of corn silage. So it's worked out really well in that degree, and what Brian does try to do is he'll contract his soybean meal, canola, Exceller meal. He doesn't have enough acres to grow much of his own beans, and he does raise some high moisture corn and then purchases some corn that we put in with the protein mix. The minerals, the vitamins, and all of that is put into the protein mix, so it's one stop, one drop. Brian feeds 3 times a day. It's the same mix every time to all the cows. And he drops the first mixer at 3:30 in the morning. He's waiting for someone to volunteer to do that, but it hasn't happened yet. So, but early, and he drops that load down. Then again, about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they come in with the second, and then they come in after dinner, 1 o'clock. And that usually takes care of everything unless there's a drastic change. So it works out real good that they've got fresh feed all the time. And for other farmers, they drop it once a day, and that works fine for them. For Brian, he wanted to keep dropping it at different times to get the cows up and get them eating, but he still pushes up 6 times a day besides. With him buying like his trace mineral vitamin pack, we use the AMPS program from PROVIMI. I wanted to say I grew up with that program, but I guess we were talking, Tim and I, and it's been 13 years that Northside Elevator switched to PROVIMI and the AMPS ration program, a very sophisticated ration system. It's a very hard system to learn, but we decided we wanted to go with what we thought was the best, and we've enjoyed working with the ration system and with the people from PROVIMI. Tim comes out to Brian's 2-3 times a year just to see how things are going, and obviously we all have problems on the farm. I'm sure every one of you have had problems, whether they're nutritionally or want to expand, and how to do that. So we take samples usually every couple of weeks, sometimes sooner, and go through with the rations. Again, the ration gets fed to all the cows. The post-fresh cows, we give some baled hay we mix into the TMR mix. and it's been working very well. We've got a one-group dry cow program. The far-off dry cows are kept in another building. And then the cows that are pre-fresh, he's got a big bedding pack pen where they go on, but they're fed the same feed all the way through the dry cow program. Heifers get fed a TMR mix with mostly haylage with a little bit of corn silage, sometimes some baled hay. What? I don't think so. Okay. So I think if there's any questions later on, we'll now I think for what we've done together with the short time that we've actually worked together, it's gone very well. And for a new, I think a lot of you, if you've gone through the building process, the first couple of years is a challenge, but things do get set up and start flowing pretty nicely after the second year.
So touching a little bit on our facilities and our milking equipment, as you can see, we have a Bomatic parlor. It's a double 12 right now, but you can see the front end of this. All we'd have to do is put the units in and the decking, and it's prepared, or ready for a double 16. As far as the morning milking, Dan jokingly was saying that I'm looking for, actually that's the only one time of the day that you can count on. And people ask, well, when can I come and see you? I said 3 o'clock in the morning. Guaranteed I'm in the barn from 3 to 4. Because I don't know, I wake up anyhow, but I get down there. I mean, I need to make sure the crew is there. And there's mornings, hey, where's Fidel or whatever. So there's days I have to make an adjustment, get somebody else up or whatever. But that's just still my passion to get up and make sure that everybody's there. And then like when we start milking in the morning, we'll bring our fresh cows up first. And I go along with the guy, whoever's scraping the barn, and we get the fresh cows up. And I still have this knack. I mean, I can pick out a cow that's not 100%, and your fresh cows are the key cows to keep them going. And I mean, if I see a cow, her eyes don't just look right, doesn't look as full of milk, I'll tell the milkers to sort her. I mean, I catch it before a computer does, basically. Well, then when our so-called herdsman, our main guy that does a lot of our treating of cows and stuff, when he comes at 7:30, they're already in the sort pen, and he'll do the check over for a DA or check for ketosis or whatever. But I think that thing of seeing them cows, just eyeballing the cows in the morning, first thing when the fresh cows come up, is a huge part of staying ahead of the game before they get run down or whatever. So we do that. We get the first group up as they're milking them. I'll clean mangers. That's when you got to decide. It's so different than in a stall barn because you got to mix amount of feed for that certain day, and every day it can change. If your moisture changes just a touch or it gets real hot, they don't eat quite as well. So all those decisions need to be made in the morning depending upon how many manger cleanings are left. So that's all part of my responsibility in the morning. But then after that, I'm here, there, and everywhere, just managing employees and crops and whatever. But my son does a lot of the computer work along with Doug, the other one that's here. They do all the programs, the herd health programs on the computer and OBSync programs and stuff like that. And Tyler's good with all that. And so I'm just still old school, but I enjoy that, just looking at the cows and eyeballing things in the morning. And like they said, so we milk at 3:30. I put the new fresh feed down right at that time, so when the cows are coming back from the parlor, there's fresh feed, and they go to eat right away. And I think that's a huge thing to have fresh feed there. And another thing that actually I think helps us that we've just started, like at the beginning of summer, we have 4 pens in the barn, 100 stalls apiece. Well, the fresh pen and pen 1 are separated, but we try and keep our fresh cows in a pen by themselves for about 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon how many are calving at any given time. But when we get to the bigger pens of 100, even though our holding area would hold them all, we bring like half of them up, and then we get them milking, and some of them are in the return lanes. We go back and scrape that one side because we rake the stalls every milking, or that's one person's responsibility to go out and rake the stalls with a hand rake every milking, we do that. So they do the one side, well, by then you got 24 or 36 cows milked, then we bring the rest up, and by that time we can, let the ones that were milked first go back already. So our pens are never empty more than 15, 20 minutes, and when you got over 100, we've got up to 130 cows now, and I mean our pregnant pens and that, we're pushing 130%, and I think it's a critical part of our success maybe is getting those cows back. Because we have a 6-row, there's only 65 headlocks, which most people would tell you that can't work. We're only 65 cows out of 130 can eat at a time. But when you keep feed there at all times, I've watched that pretty close. It's not like, unless the cows, we got mixed up a little bit where the feed got too wet and you don't have enough, then they may all come and eat, but otherwise I don't think it's ever a time where all the headlocks are full. It's more about giving them time to lay down in the comfortable sand. And by us rotating them cows where the pens are maybe only empty 15 minutes, even though that pen's getting milked, the ones get back. Or like when we take a group up, the ones on the other side are still laying. That gives them 15, 20 minutes more to lay. So that's probably part of how we can get away with overcrowding. Due to poor milk prices, like everybody here who's a farmer knows, we're gonna try for another 25, 30 cows just to see if we can get away with it. Because everybody tells you, if you dry cows up or sell some cows and you go up in milk, you're overcrowded. Well, we don't see that. If we dry 10 cows up, we drop in milk. So, I mean, we're very comfortable at this point of being 130% overcrowded, and we're going to try a little more just because we got the feed, we got the barn, you got the milkers. It's just a numbers game. So anyhow, that's kind of the layout of the barn and the milking procedure, and that's my son Tyler talking with Dan. I think I covered the most of that. Back up there, Tim, one. You maybe can't, we're actually looking from the one end of the barn. So actually down on this end of the barn, up in this corner is where our pre-fresh pen is. When we built the barn, I thought, well, yeah, that pen will be for our dry cows. And we weren't, 400 stall barn, 400 cows, but you know how it goes. We've expanded way beyond the numbers I thought I would already. So obviously we don't have room for all our dry cows. When we dry our cows up and we dry our second lactation and more, about 45 days, first lactation cows get dried up at 60. They get moved to another barn. It's all part of one facility, but like 2/10 of a mile. So we're constantly moving cows around. But we bring them back to this pen that is right next to our fresh pen. It's just a pack, and that's where they calve. We try and get them back in there 2 to 3 weeks prior to calving, give them their vaccinations and whatever they need at that time, and then they calve on the pack. We move them across to, we got 2 pens where we milk our fresh cows, milk them twice, and then they go right into the free stalls again. And it seems to work very well.
This test was so far and away the best cow we had in the barn. She made 46,000, back like in 1988 or 89, whatever it was. And I mean, that was huge back in the day. But then we got this bull, Fustead Emery Blitz, which went to select sires, and he was the #1 milk bull in the breed for probably a couple of years. And there were just a lot. I mean, the cattle were good too. I mean, there's still people milking them today that still have blitzes, and I still say they just stand out in their milk production.
Okay, genetics, genomics, whichever way you want to talk about it. Going back, genetics has been my passion, say, ever since high school. I had some breeders that I looked up to. Maybe you heard of Joe Wall, Holsteins. George Woggle was one that kind of got me into breeding for the genetic kind of cattle, stuff that Bullsteads want, but that's back in the late 70s, and it's changed drastically along the way. But back in the day, that's when we were in our tie stall barn. Genetics was huge, and that was just my passion, to breed cows that I could get bulls from. And we had a lot of foreign visitors and everything else, selling bulls, selling embryos. We still do some of that, but you know, there's no guarantees with that stuff. Flushing cows, sometimes it goes real good, sometimes you don't get nothing. Now I have to have a certain amount of income, so it's like our milk is our main focus, but I still love the genetic part of it. Going back to this bull that we're talking about, he still is the #1 sales bull that Select Sires ever had, that Blitz bull. He sold 1.75 million units of semen. He was born in like '92. I've still got some semen in the tank. Use a little bit of it here and there. Back in the day, he was like 200-300 pounds of higher than any other milk for how well they milked. He didn't test very well, but they just milked like crazy. He had the highest milk in the breed for probably like 3 years. Well, then we had a son of him. I don't know if any of you follow Fustead Guthrie. That was another bull of ours that was very popular at Select, and that was a son of Blitz also. Now to touch on genomics, first of you, how many of you even know what genomics is? About half or a little more. Well, this is how things have changed so much. You know, 20 years ago, you'd breed a cow and you wouldn't know what she was going to be till she was milking. And that's when you'd make your decision. If you used a bull a fair amount, when you got 10 milking daughters, you liked them, that's what you used. Well, here's 7, 8 years, I think something like that, maybe a little more. Maybe there's a geneticist in here that can say that exact. They went to genomics, which is where you test as soon as a calf is born. Like now, we'll take a hair sample or a blood sample, you can do either or, and you send it off to a lab, and within a couple of weeks, you get a genetic profile of that animal, which tells you to within about 70% reliability on almost, and I mean, it's all the traits: milk production, fat test, all the health traits, stature, how good the udder's gonna be. You know all that stuff already to within that certain amount of reliability at 2 weeks of old. So it's gotten to be so fast paced, but it's still, for the high end stuff, it's really good. Like 90% of the bulls we're using today are genomic bulls, which are bulls as soon as they make semen at a year old, we're using them. All based on all just their genetic profile. And that's where years ago, like I said, it was all about cows and how well now and being into this 7, 8 years, it is kind of unbelievable how close a lot of this is coming through. I mean, you use a bull because his numbers look good on paper. A couple of years, you got a lot of good young cows from certain bulls. So it's a very, very fast-paced thing. If you ask somebody what bulls they're using, it changes every month. Every month, there's new bulls starting to make semen, and we're one of the partner herds, so-called, for Select Sires, that any new young bulls they get, we get semen from those bulls, but then if we get a bull that tests high enough, it can only go to them. But it's a way to get the fastest paced genetics. That seems to be what it's all about today. Everything is so fast, and then you can flush them, already at 8, 9 months, so you'll have daughters on the ground before mama ever, milks or anything, or granddaughters almost were to that point. So it has become very, very fast-paced, the genetic world, and I still enjoy it, but there's risk to it. You use wrong stuff, or like I said, you flush cows that don't always turn out, where you got X amount of milk in the tank every day, and at least know you got that much money coming. So it's been a lot of fun, but it's a challenge. Okay, so this just shows bulls that go back that I've used: Black Star, Durham, Goldwyn, Blitz. Black Star was a bull that was very, very popular back in the day. We made that, actually Charlie Will from Select Sires made that mating on a mark that we had, and we got some fantastic cows out of that, and that's where we sold a lot of bulls in the early 90s, had cows, had a group of Black Star daughters, 3 full sisters that all ended up going excellent from that bull. And in the early 90s, every year at Expo time, there'd be cars of, people from Holland and Germany and stuff coming up to see those cows because they were really good. That was that Nectarland, Billy Bob Mark family. So we've one other one other cow family that's just kind of prestigious to our family is Fustead Durham Evelyn. That was, my son bought a heifer just at a sale, just because she was a nice heifer, and we bred her to Durham, and he got this show cow. That was my son that got killed in a car accident in 2008, but we still have several daughters from her, so that's another side of the thing that, you know, showing. My son still likes to show cows and stuff, a little bit interested, so we're doing a little of both. I like the genetic in where I can sell stuff and get money. The kids, they like to go to the fairs and the shows and have a good time, but you got to have genetics to pay for the showing is what it amounts to. Now, some people might take that offensive, because if you have really good show cows, there's a market for that too. If anybody here knows, there's show cows that bring $100,000 or more too, just like high genetic stuff, but it's two different things. But to keep the young people involved in farming and stuff, you know, they don't understand genetics, but going to a fair and showing animals and stuff, that's all a lot of fun. So we're trying to play both sides of the fence a little bit yet. So this was the cow that my son was so proud of. Actually, he died in a car accident in November of 2008. In 2009, we still brought her to Expo, and she got nominated All-American that year. So that was kind of a overwhelming good moment, but yet the fact he wasn't here to see it was tough. But we had some people show her for us. She was actually 6th place in the class and 1st place bred and owned. So she was actually the best cow here at Madison in 2009 in her class.
We're 4th going into 5th generation, and you know, the part of getting along is, you know, definitely not an issue. So I think that's huge, just to have a close-knit family that everybody gets along for the most part. Everybody has it.
Okay, I guess some of this I've touched on before, but I just, you know, the keys to success for a family obviously is, you know, everybody getting along, and we've, to be this active yet and still growing at 4th and 5th generation, and my wife, she's, doesn't milk cows anymore, but she's a babysitter every day for the 6 grandkids. And we cook meals and feed our employees, so that's a job in itself. My mother's in the center of the picture, which is here. She lives less than a mile away from us and still helps out taking care of the kids in that too. But I think that just being a family farm and having the kids there and keeping them involved, and that's what makes things go pretty smooth. An important part of keeping it in the family. I mean, you have to get along and work together. So I think what else here? Planning for the future, like I said, my son and his wife, I think long term, I mean now we're transitioning more of the farm to him. My daughter and son-in-law, they love the farm. My son-in-law, he does the stuff, but he's probably not looking to be a partner in the farm. He doesn't work the hours that my son and I do. He's a city boy, but he's still, when he got married, he worked in town for a couple of years and then wanted to work with us, and wanted to be an equal part, but after a few weeks of following Tyler and I around, he said, I'll just be an employee and not have all the responsibilities. But it works good that way. You know, everybody's situation is different, but Tyler and his wife and their kids, and our grandsons too. This is actually our daughter's son here, Stan. That's our oldest grandson, 8 years old. He'll start showing cattle next year, so. This is actually a slide of just here in June. We hosted the Marathon County Dairy Breakfast. We never will know how many people were there because it was such a huge crowd. For a month afterwards, we talked to people that actually were at the farm but didn't get to eat because the line was so long. We're guessing we had some, I mean, for Marathon County, The most people they ever had before was 2,800 people, and we figure there was probably over 4,000 actually there, but it was just a perfect day, and we're close to town, so, but they're gonna start really stepping up, promoting this more, because Marathon County, I think, has the potential. There's other counties around that have 6,000, 7,000 every year, but that was something we did this year. Had a lot of people show up. The 4-H project support, our animals have been at the fair since back when my dad was a little, you're talking 70, 80 years. As far as our family, it's never missed showing cattle. Obviously, like when I got done, you know, our kids were too small, but we've always done this. I mean, the last 2 years we've had, 2 years ago we had over 20 head at the fair. This year it was 19, and nobody from our family was showing. It was all just kids in the 4-H club. My sister's general leader of the 4-H, and anybody who's got any interest in dairy, if they want to show a calf, we provide a calf. They come to our farm and work with them off and on, and it's a very rewarding experience for these kids, and it's good publicity for us. But again, that's something I think to keep the kids involved and show them what farming's really all about. That's something we do. And the scholarships in honor of our son who got killed in that accident. We've had a couple auctions, fundraisers, and raised a lot of money, and we give scholarships every year in his name to, you know, they do it through the 4-H and through the Holstein breeders. We've had church service right on our farm, which for some of the city people, that's been just kind of funny, you know, watching them walk around or think, oh man, this is unbelievable. You know, and our church is really only a mile from our farm, so we've had that service on our farm several times now. We just set up a large tent and do it there. And the other thing that we've done for years, I don't know, any of the FFA kids in here, I'm sure, aware of the Food for America program, which started back in the 70s. It was when I was in high school. We hosted that for a few years, and then after I got out of school, it went to a few other farms, and all at once they couldn't find nobody to do it. So we've done it now, I think, for like the last, going on 20 years. I heard it, my wife's shaking her head. I think it's over 20 years. But, and this was just this last Thursday and Friday. We have about 500 kids in our school district, and over a 2-day period, all the 4th graders come out to the farm. And there'll be like 40, 50 FFA kids out there, and they set up stations all around the farm and take these kids around, and it's just still amazing how many people we, you know, at like the fair when cow shows and stuff going on, kids, oh, do you remember when I was at your farm? And for that, like, no, don't remember these kids, but they sure do remember it. And that's just part of our promoting dairy and promoting agriculture and giving, you know, agriculture a positive spin and showing people what it's really all about. So. Question? Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dan. Okay, we have some time for questions, and if you got a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic.
You have mentioned that your farm is before is under the transition period, so your land cannot go combine with the herd numbers increase. So how many experience that 100 cows combine with how many hectares of field, including the corn maize and alfalfa?
How much land?
Yeah, how much?
Do you have how much acres of alfalfa and corn?
Okay, we crop about 1,300 to 1,400 acres right now. I'm really not sure how that compares to a hectare. Maybe you can tell. 2.2? 1 hectare. Okay.
500 acres.
Okay. Yeah, so we have, right now we're raising more corn, because corn silage, obviously you can get the most tonnage per acre off of corn.
Okay.
Like we probably just had over 20 ton to the acre on some of our silage, and maybe 15 on the lower side. So we have about 700 acres of corn, about 500 acres of alfalfa, and then we seed down every year, 100 to 150, and that would be some peas and oats with grass seed, which Dan mentioned, like our peas and oats we use for our heifers then.
Okay. So you mentioned you harvest the corn silage with the BMR?
BMR.
Cut it on the cob, on top of the cob, you leave the rest in the field?
No, it's the whole stalk, but BMR, that stands for like brown ribber, but it's a very high digestible, maybe.
Oh, okay. But
Dan-
it cannot defend the wind. It's easy to get burned, yeah? Because BMR breed have a low island inside the...
Yeah, it can break off, but I mean, we're usually right on, you know, when it's ready to chop, we're doing it. Like we just spent the last 7 days, long day, you know, like 8 in the
Okay.
morning till midnight chopping corn just to get this done, to try and get it all.
Okay.
We're trying to get it all off, you know, at this 67, 68 is a perfect world.
Okay.
But you know, to do 400 acres, you gotta
Yeah.
you gotta start a little early. Our beginning of our first piles juicing just a little bit, but by the time we finished last night, the last stuff was a hair dry. But I mean, we do the best we can. But I mean, I really believe that has helped our cows milk more, the BMR corn.
Because it's have good digestible, yeah.
Yeah, very high digestible. I mean, and I have several friends. I mean, I don't know all this. I mean, in three years when we started this, I have several registered breeder friends that I've talked to about all this, and they'll tell me the same thing. Seamers, Holsteins, I'm sure, number you know them, very high herd in the state. When Sin Energy Dairy, Jay Jolke, last year they run out of their microgen BMR corn and had to feed another brand of just dual purpose corn. They dropped 4 pounds of milk like right now.
Okay.
So I mean, it's a little more money for the seed. And some guys question me about, well, if you don't even have enough acres, how does that matter? And I guess I don't ever stop to really figure it out, but my passion is the cows. And I love, you know, going out and seeing. I mean, we haven't had a cow hit 200 pounds a day yet, but we've had 2 over 190 and like 3 over 180. I think we had 50 cows over 150 pounds a day on the last test.
Okay.
So, and that's what gets me excited. If I got to buy a little more corn, but I love going out in the barn and seeing these full udders, and so I'll do what I have to make that work. But we'll gain more acres as we go. But I still think the BMR pays for itself, even though you're taking about probably a 15% yield hit too versus some of your other corns. But if you lose 3 to 4 pounds of milk or 5 pounds of milk,
So the seed is quite expensive for BMR.
it's more expensive than regular seed, yes.
So you mentioned that you have used some high moisture corn. So you replace the concentrate, a part of?
We feed high moisture shell corn, which we'll combine. That's where we go and just take the ears off, and then combine actually shells it. But with this high energy or digestible corn, with good starch levels and stuff, we don't feed as much high moisture corn as we used to.
Okay.
So, but then we still feed some protein supplements, which are protein. Maybe Dan want to just say what's all in our protein mix, the different fats and everything?
Yeah, and obviously when you've got a good herd like Brian has, you end up with, you know, we use the soybean meal, canola meal, like a lot of people use, and then the Exceller meal. But when you, and then we get the minerals and vitamins, comes from PROVIMI, and that's where you kind of can gel everything together, and that's why I guess Northside is a very large mill. It's one of the larger mills in the state. And with the program that we have, and you bring up the BMR corn silage, that's what a lot of the bigger farms have gone to that. And the tonnage is a little bit lower, but again, it comes to BMR corn, put it on your highest fertility soil, so you get a stronger stalk and you get the production level on the corn that you want. And you had mentioned about the BMR tipping over. Yeah. When it first came out, the BMR was a very weak, the lignin was very, very low, and they did not have it strong enough to stand up in conditions in Wisconsin with a lot of wind. And over the years, they've done better in the genetics of the BMR corn silage. We have a much better stand now that we can get it in and get it put in properly and do the job that that we want it to do. And most farms, you do see that, where I've got farmers that have fed it and then ran out, and you see that 4 to 6 pound difference. But normally, like in Brian's herd, we used to feed 40 to 45 pounds of the BMR corn silage as fed. And you really need to feed that, 40 to 50 pounds or more of the BMR to get everything out of it that you want. Now we're feeding about 50 to 52 pounds of corn silage per head per day, usually around the 68% moisture, and then come in with alfalfa haylage. So it does work out good that way. Vitamin pack we get from PROVIMI, and Northside Elevator, like I said, we do a lot of farms. We've got a lot of farms all over, and most of the guys are using the BMR, and it's a lot of people are trying it, and it just depends on how well you use it, and then supplement everything properly, and you do get a good flow of milk from it. There's no doubt.
Okay. So the question is for the high moisture corn is that how much you use it to replace the concentrate?
What we do is we look at the ration system, the AMPS ration system like we talked, and we try to use the high moisture corn so that we can use it up in a year, and then we just bring in dry corn into the protein mix to supplement, so that we've got the whole year, we've got high moisture and dry corn together. And normally we're feeding anywhere from 12 to 14 or 11 to 14 pounds of high moisture corn, usually from 22 to 27 on moisture, I want to say. And so the dry corn is just brought in because we're a little tight on acres, and so we just fill in with dry corn to supplement the high moisture.
Yeah, I often have. Okay.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions? There we go in the back.
There's a guy that wants to learn.
How many cows are milked in your parlor at one time? How long does it take to milk one cow? How long does it take to milk through one complete milking?
Okay. Right now it's taken us about 4.5 hours to milk 490 cows. Every cow is a little different, but our average time of milking, I think, is 4 minutes and something on the average cow. Doug, you probably, it's maybe close to 5, but that can vary. We milk 12 cows at a time on each side, so 24. Our parlor is what you call a double 12. So we bring 12 in, put them on the units on that side, and as they're milking, the other side's done. So it's just kind of a continuous revolving. But you get your slow milkers, which back in the stall barn, that didn't matter. You just saw that milker over there stayed on longer. Big deal. You'd go back and get it 10 minutes later. I mean, we've had cows since we've been in the parlor. I've seen cows that have taken, I'll come in there and all at once there's only one unit on. And I'll go look, and she's over 10 minutes already. And that cow gets put on a cull list because you just can't, unless she's really, really good, you could do something, milk her at the end. But for the most part, now that we're caught up, our heifer number's been growing, we can cull more. That's a kind of a key factor, because if you got one cow that takes 11, 12 minutes and the rest are all done in 7, you're holding up that whole side for that extra 5 minutes. So that is something we watch now that we're able to fine tune more. When you go from 150 to 550 in cows, you're trying to save every cow you can, and you don't care how long they milk, you just need the milk. But now we're finally at a point where we're starting to calve a lot of heifers, so we're culling, which we cull now for, maybe a cow's udders getting a little too deep, cell counts, breeding problems. We used to breed cows 10 times. We might give them 4 or 5 breedings now at the most, unless there's something really special. Now that you can't use BST no more, you can't keep a cow milking the way you could before. It's critical to get them bred on time. So we're trying to be very aggressive with our breeding program to get them bred more, quicker, so that those things. But I think that answers what double 12, 4.5 hours, yes.
Okay, any other questions? Here we go.
Doug, now what is
I don't think this is fair, but
I was just wondering if you would like to explain when you started your expansion, how you got your cows rolling into the parlor easier and stuff with the cows that you
Okay,
purchased?
that's a good point. Doug, what are you going to ask me? That's the guy that does our records. But yeah, I think we had, and that was, so Seehafers out of Marshfield, they put our parlor in, and after they come and they helped us like the first 3 milkings, which we started on a Monday right after Expo. We could have started a week early, but I was not missing Expo. I got 41 years in already, so. But anyhow, we started on a Monday, and I had 100 cows lined up that I purchased from some other very high-profile herds: Mitch Bruning, Mystic Valley, Bob Webb, Summit Farms, Jay Jolke, Sin Energy Dairy, and those were all setups identical to ours, free stalls with parallel parlor. And so we brought them 100 cows in that day. So milking number 1, we had 100 cows that knew what the parlor was. So we also brought like 80 of our own cows, which we were milking 170 at the time because we were trying to grow that summer of 14. We were growing, we were switching cows out of our machine shed and everything else. But we only brought 80 of them down that first day. And it was still a challenge, but those cows, and I'd highly recommend this to anybody that's thinking of expanding or whatever. If you have cows that know the system, they help your cows. I mean, we still had some cows, you'd have 3 or 4 guys pushing them to get them into the parlor, but Seehafers said that was one of the smoothest transitions they ever seen, and I truly believe it was that we had cows that, we had some of them cows that come from a few of them herds, they come right off the trailer, never bellered, never did nothing, they right to the parlor. Well, your cows kind of mix in with that. Like that's, now our heifers are still raised on just bedding packs, and they never see a free stall. They come into that pre-fresh pen, that's a bedding pack, and yet the minute we put them in with the fresh cows, I don't know, if there's 1 in 20 that we literally have to push, they just mix in and go in the parlor. They, the other ones teach them, and that was critical in the beginning to have them bunch of cows. That's a good point, Doug. That helped us a lot.
any more questions? I think we have time for just one more question.
Can you talk about the breeding schedule, such as matrix rate, and what do you think the most important critical point, and such as open days and others?
Our breeding, like I say, since we went off BST, this has all changed some. I mean, our really good cows that I'm flushing and stuff, I still want them to make a 365-day record for publicity, or I mean for advertising for records and stuff, so we maybe don't breed them quite as quick. But otherwise, we'll put semen in any cow. Just within the last 2 weeks here, we even bred some cows at 57 days because they were in a really good heat. And I've learned just recently that actually you have a better chance of getting a cow to fertilize in that 60 to 70 days than you will at 80 to 90. I look them up and they're milking 170. Oh, I can't breed her yet. That's not, you're better off breeding them, because if they're a really good cow, they're going to milk that for 3-4 months. And so we've been breeding now at 50 some days. If we don't catch them in heat by maybe 80 days, we'll put them on this off-sync program, which is a shot of GnRH, and a week later you come back with 2 lute shots and then GnRH, and then you just breed them. So we'll do that. As far as our heifers, we used to calve our heifers at 2.3, 2.4, but we've moved that up a few months. We're trying to calve most of our animals now at 2 years or 2 years and a month. I still like to get them to have some size. because we don't have enough room in the barn where we can have just 2-year-old pens. Our heifers go right with the cows, but they stay separate. You know, it's more critical, I think, to keep the cows that are just fresh them first 2 weeks. We feed them just a little bit different, give them extra hay and straw for them first 20 days to get them going. But after that, our heifers are right in with our cows, but that's why we don't push. I know a lot of breeders it's all about that money and numbers thing. They're calving them 1.8, 1.9. I'm just not sold on that yet, because I like them to be a little bit bigger so they can mix in with the cows. That cover.
And do you use the sex semen?
On our heifers. Few cows, on our heifers, more of it.
Not lactation cows?
No, very little. It's hard enough to get them bred. You're still better off with, you know, conventional semen. But we do, you know, we do ET work. So on our ETs, our better cows, we're, you know, flushing and use sex semen. So
Okay, thank you.
I think that one guy gets.
Yeah, we'll give him.
He had his hand up at the same time. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's not a long question or a big question, but I was just wondering, 90% breeding to genomic young sires. How many breedings per young sire would be average? In other words, 20 breedings, it depends on the young sire, but how many breedings to any particular young sire?
Yeah, like I say, I don't have a set. Well, like our bull Fustead Tangle Lilas, I've probably used 150 shots of him, but that's only because he's our bull. But no, for the most part, like I said, it's right now, every month there's new bulls, which should be better than the last time. So we'll maybe get 10 or 20 shots of a bull, and then we're moving on to the next thing. But we still do use, like I say, 10 and maybe it's even 20% of proven bulls. You know, if we, like Montrose, for example, any of you know, I mean, Montroses are great, you know, and Moguls are great. We're still using Mogul himself. Our Moguls are just fantastic cows. They were always ugly as heifers, but they developed into great cows. So we're still using Mogul, even as almost more like a cleanup bull in a way, but they're great. So when we use a little bit of all these different bulls, but then as they calve and we see the ones we like, Monterey's are really nice young cows now. Montroses are awesome, and you know, we'll go back and use some of them. And I'm hoping that in about a year from now, Lilas will be another great, have a bunch of great 2-year-olds, and then more people will use him again.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed our farm tour today. Just one more round of applause for our presenters. Thank you. Have a good day.